Welcome to All Kinds of Minds, Neurodiversity in Our World, a podcast dedicated to celebrating neurodiversity in our society and educating listeners on how neurodiverse people interact with the world. I'm Tia, a volunteer with Welcome Neurodiversity's podcast team, and I am so excited to introduce today's guest, Kaz Windness. Kaz is a talented author and illustrator. Kaz's work has brought the voices of neurodivergent characters to life, creating books that inspire empathy, understanding, and acceptance. You may know Kaz from Bitsy Bat School Star, a heartwarming story about a neurodivergent bat finding her place in the world. Now Kaz is back with Bitsy Bat Team Star, the second installment in this beloved series where Bitsy learns about teamwork, friendship, and embracing who you are. Kaz's stories captivate young readers and serve as a powerful tool for celebrating neurodiversity, making them an essential voice in children's literature. We'll dive into Kaz's creative journey, the process behind Bitsy Bat Team Star, and how storytelling can create more inclusive world for all minds. Welcome to the podcast, Kaz. Can you share a bit about your personal neurodivergent journey and how it has influenced your career path?
Sure. So I didn't know that I was autistic until I was well into adulthood. And I had a child that was identified pretty early in school, around first grade. The teacher brought me in and they were like, we're having a lot of social issues with your child. And just a lot of disruptions, a lot of correcting the teacher, a lot of rigidity. But also your child is extremely smart. And I've been teaching for over 20 years. I've seen this often. I am certain your child is on spectrum, but what that teacher had told us was not to seek diagnosis, because in our particular school, they saw that that meant that that child was isolated, that they wouldn't be allowed to participate and excel in the way that they knew that our child needed to. So we took on that advice and we understood, and there was diagnosed autism, at least in my father's side of the family. So I'm like, oh, that checks out. But we didn't want to hold them back. And, they were hyperlexic, reading full books at age 3, and they enrolled in school a little bit early, even though they were always lagging behind in those social skills. So as, they went through elementary, they did really well in elementary, at least in terms of schoolwork and intelligence and those type of things, still with a lot of social struggles. I was called into the office all the time with behavioral issues and just, doing things that were inappropriate and just not understanding why they were in trouble. But once we got into middle school, they started to lag behind with their schoolwork as well. Started to really struggle, and that started to impact them. They weren't working as fast as the other kids. Like, the intelligence there was there, but the ability to keep up on testing. And we would confide in these teachers that, our child is neurodivergent, and they would try and make those accommodations and exceptions. But just to have the know-how, to have the intelligence, but not to have the ability to accomplish that in a live setting, they were also starting to deal with a lot of depression. So by the time they were in high school, they were fully failing, and we just realized we need more assistance. We need more help with this, and that meant seeking out a diagnosis. And during the process of my child's diagnosis, it became very evident that I was also autistic. So it's one of those things, and you probably hear this from a lot of parents, that why didn't they know this about me sooner? How did they miss me? But through that process, I recognized that I was also autistic and sought out my own diagnosis. And it took me about 2 years to really contextualize my life in terms of autism, being autistic, and also a grieving period. On one hand, it was good to know that I wasn't broken, that I really was wired differently, and that's why I had the struggles I did. But on the other hand, had I had that knowledge, I would have had a lot more confidence. I would have not felt like something was wrong with me. And also maybe I could have accessed helps that would have meant that, maybe I would have been able to do the things I wanted to do sooner in my life. So that's why I am here. That's basically how I came into my knowing that I was autistic. And since finding that out for myself, it's interesting how many people on my mom's side of the family have also discovered their own neurodivergence, like the genetic propensity is absolutely there. We've been there all the line. We're looking at our ancestry and going like, oh my gosh, how did we not know? Like, it's so obvious. So
I also feel that I wasn't diagnosed until COVID,
oh,
kind
wow.
of. After COVID, someone jokingly said, "Are you autistic?" And I was like, "No."
Right? We're
Well,
like, wait, what?
yeah, because I'm really good at masking and I do a lot of
Yes,
parroting.
same.
So when I didn't have that during COVID, I was kind of like, oh. And then
Yeah.
I don't hear a lot of people talking about the grieving, because I feel like I
Hmm.
did that too, where it was like, how much different could have my education been if I would have known earlier?
Yeah, and my
Uh,
friendships and yeah, my relationships. Yeah.
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 Now I'm totally fine with it, but because like you
Yeah.
said, like I
No,
think it would
it
have.
was about 2 years, and like every day it was, it was all I could think about. All I could think about. And I read every single, it became my hyperfixation, became my special interest, where I just read everything I could find out about, and, joined all the groups and listened to all the podcasts, and just like I could not get enough information about it. But it also meant that, is kind of pulling out all those roots of, all of my history. And now I was into my 40s by the time this happened. So there was a lot of history to process through.
Yeah, that's a lot. It's I hate that I see a lot of it happening, but I'm hoping that more education and more
Hmm.
awareness is helping with it. So
Absolutely.
how does your neurodivergence influence your storytelling and your artistic choices?
I mean, it always has. You hear about the kids that are really into horses or really into trains. I was really into art and I was really into books. I was definitely that kid, nose in a book or drawing all the time. In fact, I got in trouble a lot in school for doodling and drawing, but it was also like a soothing thing for me, just like to have something to do with my hands and something to pay attention to. And it made it so I could actually learn better and listen better. So every time I was told that I had to make my hands quiet and I had to make eye focus, like, okay, I can do those things, but it's all I can do. I'm no longer paying attention to you. I'm no longer absorbing what you're saying. I am noticing all the little things about your face that I wish I could draw. I was always an art kid. So, and I was always telling stories with my art, telling stories with pictures. So, that's always been who I have been, being a storyteller. But as far as telling the stories that, we're talking about Bitsy Bat, Team Star, Bitsy Bat School Star, it was an art professor. And so as I was coming into this understanding about myself, I started to talk to students who I was pretty, you get the spidey sense. Like, so I would start to disclose my neurodivergence with them, and then they would come to me and tell me I'm autistic too, and have a real connection like that. And one of my students, after they left my classes and graduated, we became good friends, and we talking, doing a lot of texting, and we were talking about how things would have been different for us had we known that. Had we known about being autistic while we were going to school. And I said, you know what it's like? It's like if you're a bat in a classroom full of mice. And you know how people think that bats and mice are like the same, except one of them has wings, but they're completely different. They're biologically different. They have completely different needs. And I was like, there's an idea there. And my student was like, a story like that really would have helped me feel better about myself. That would have really helped me growing up. And then I was thinking about my own child, and I'm like, it would probably help them too. I think this is something I have to write. So I immediately started writing that story, but I also hadn't come out. Like you, I'm very good at masking. I've practiced all this so I can, inflect my voice and show up in certain ways. And so I hadn't publicly told people that I was autistic, and I knew should I pursue publication with this and should it get picked up, I would have to disclose. And that also meant disclosing to people in my family that I knew would not accept it very well. And an interesting thing about that is I think people that are undiagnosed or unwilling to consider that are often a lot more resistant or a lot more judgmental about it. I think because you're exposing something they're afraid to accept about themselves. And so I knew that this story was important enough to tell that I would have to come out this way. So I started to go through the process of disclosing to extended family. And for the most part, a lot of them accept it. I think even on my dad's side, they're like, yeah, we're all a little bit different over here. And I'm like, I know. So and then having Bitsy Bat come out and going into classrooms. And I just think on the other side of the bravery, what it takes to be vulnerable about this is the ability to help so many people. And so many people that in their adulthood are like, you were the one that helped me find out that I was ADHD. You were the one who helped me go get tested. And now I know that I'm OCD and I'm getting help around that. So it's like, I'm so glad that I exposed that piece about myself, because it is helping other people. And like you said, if we have more understanding about it, if we have a better ability to accept kids in the classroom for these differences, like that's just going to be better for everybody and better for our future. And isn't that what we want to do? We want to leave a better future.
I love that. So what do you hope readers take away from your stories, especially these two, both in terms of the message and the characters?
Yeah. So, Bitsy is a bit autobiographical. Bitsy is me in a lot of ways. And I always like to say that, yes, it's told from an autistic perspective, but there are a lot of different, stories and perspectives. I'm just one person, and it's just a small piece of what autism is. But I really hope what they take from it, you see a lot of those stories out there that are othering the autistic character, and it's usually not told from their perspective. It's told from a caretaker, it's told from the brother or the friend or the parent, and it's usually about the autistic character, communicating differently or having different things, but it's usually about them having something that they're really good at. And they offer this special thing to our community. Oh, they can really solve math in this way. And yay, that we now see that they're worthy to be included. I really wanted these stories to be about accepting people exactly for who they are. It's not about what they perform. It's that we are all lovable and that we all deserve accommodations. We all deserve the ability to access things just like everybody else. And that includes communication and includes like sensory needs. And so for me, just showing those accommodations in the classroom, and that it's not very hard to make those adjustments so everybody can participate. In book one, there is a special star activity, and I love seeing classrooms doing that. So it is an opportunity for every child to recognize the things that make them special and to have those celebrated, but also a way for us to talk about our differences. There's multiple disabled characters in these books. In the second book, there's a new character, Enzo Owl, and that you mentioned, who is non-speaking. He uses an AAC device. He also uses sign language to communicate, and it is not central to the story. It is just a character that communicates differently. So it's just showing these things to normalize them, which makes it easier for these kids in the classroom to be accepted by their peers, to not have it be so complex to explain it to them, because there's a book that a teacher or a parent or a caregiver can read to their child and just make it easier for them to accept that child with a difference.
Yeah, and I'm an early educator, and so we get a lot of books from our corporate office that is surrounding like diversity, and there's a lot of books where I just get enraged by them. And I could not, and I don't know, like I was like, I can't explain it, I don't know why, but I don't want this in my classroom. And you explained it perfectly. It isn't the perspective of like the neurodivergent character, it was perspective of the caretaker, which is important, but I was like, I need stories from like, especially the like autistic perspective. So thank you, one, for writing. Because I came across your book on Instagram. Well, I follow someone that does like a lot of book recommendations. And
I love that.
So that's how I found your first book. So I was pumped, and then I got everyone and their mother sending it to me.
That's great to hear.
So like we love it at our school. And we always get it from the library during, I don't know when we get it from the library.
Yeah, libraries are great.
We always get library books. We have 64 on the hold right now.
Oh, awesome. I love it when they all hit at once, too.
Right.
Christmas. Yeah.
Yes. So your book, Bitsy Bat, School Star, which is the first one, beautifully represents neurodivergent experiences. You kind of talked about like what inspired you to write it, but what inspired you, like the imagery and I want to say it felt like a wave to me of like how you wrote things. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, there's a lot of things that. So one is the story writing. So both these books are told in the classic 3-act story structures, where you introduce a character, their environment, and then you immediately introduce the problem, and then the problem gets worse until you get to a climactic moment where everything's going wrong, and they discover what the solution is in that chaos of everything going wrong. So in the first book, Bitsy tries to fit in, and it just gets worse and worse and worse for her until she has a meltdown. I mean, that page where she has the meltdown is still emotional for me. It's still raw. I know exactly how that feels to just not be able to hold it all together anymore. And also the following pages where she is exhausted and she's in shame. I mean, for me to have a public meltdown, it's like my goal with every conference I go to. I'm like, number one, have fun. Number two, don't have a public meltdown. And there have been times I've had to run to my hotel room. So there is that natural wave that goes in that storytelling arc, and sort of the emotional arc too, where it gets lower and lower. But you'll see that when I originally designed the book, it was a horizontal format. It was a landscape format. And as I was writing it, I realized that, this is about her flying, but this is about emotional ups and downs. So I talked with the art director and the editor, and I'm like, can I turn the book the other way? Which was a lot of work in terms of like drawing it a different way. But I really wanted you to have that feeling of up and down. So in design wise, I am thinking about one where you place the text, because your eye is going to follow that text naturally. So you will see, and actually you could draw a line through my whole book and see how your eye goes up and down on the text, and then you're visually going up and down, and they're usually crossing each other. So you do get this kind of wave through the book. So that's cool that you noticed that there is that wave to it. That was very intentional, and I want you to end on a high, but I am absolutely thinking about how your eye is going through that. And also visually, color is a really important aspect of how I design my books. I always think about, in cinema, they have that music track, and the music track is often, they also use color, but that music track is often telling you how to feel emotionally. And I think the picture book equivalent of that is color. So I'm thinking about on every single page and every single scene, and just what the emotional temperature is of it, and what I want the audience to feel, even just on a subconscious level when they're looking at that book visually. And I am very carefully planning the color palette for that. I spent a lot of time on that color palette, just, like how is she feeling now? And as it's getting worse, and you'll notice in the first book where she gets to that meltdown page, I saturated it up. I tipped up that red so you could really feel that heat in the blood and the meltdown. I wanted you to know, and I also bring her in really close to the camera so you can't escape it. She is right in your face. You were feeling everything that she's feeling. So I'm definitely thinking about all of that. But as far as the palettes on both of these books, I did want them to feel cozy and warm and comforting. And I'm also thinking about the autistic readers that, a lot of picture books have that really saturated primary color, and it's just like too much for your eyeballs. And I wanted you to feel like a warm, cozy, soft blanket when you're reading these books. So yeah, lots of planning. I'm thinking about everything.
I love that. And then for your second one, which will come out it's tomorrow, but it'll come out when I publish this as well.
Yeah,
what
great.
made you, what inspired you to continue the story?
So mostly it was because the first book was received so well. In my mind, it was a singular book. I did see that Bitsy had potential to tell more stories, but it wasn't something I presented or was pitching. But when the first book received 3-star trade reviews, which is pretty rare, and it hit a bunch of lists, and it was just being well received the way it was, my editor came back to me and asked if I had other ideas for other books. So we started a dialogue about that. And when I had first pitched Bitsy Bat, like the original drawing of her was pretty spooky. Like it was kind of a Halloween-y little bat. I mean, I run a little spooky, so fair. But when they came back to me, one of the publishers had said, we really love the story. We think it's an important story. We want to publish it, but we can't publish her looking like this. It's going to be considered a Halloween book, and then it's only going to have that limited time on the shelf, and it's not a Halloween book. Can you make her an owl? And I always try and my initial reaction is, hell no. But I'm like, I really need to take it on and think about it. So I went back and I drew her as an owl, and I drew her family as owls, and I just could not. Conceptually, it was so important for me to have her be reversed, like for her classroom to be upside down and her classmates to be upside down, because that visually really felt like what it's felt for me to be, neurodivergent in a neurotypical world. So I ended up just making her cuter and softer, and I just switching up her color palette, so it was that pink and gray instead of that black with big candy corn eyeballs. Just look back at it now, I'm like, oh yeah, that was definitely a spooky Bitsy. But I never stopped thinking about those little owls. Like, the owls were cute. And as I was able to go into classrooms with the first book and meet non-speaking students and people that used spelling boards and AAC devices, I'm like, I just don't see many non-speaking characters. Besides not seeing enough autistic characters, I'm not seeing non-speaking characters. And I would maybe there is an owl. Maybe there is an owl that comes to school, and maybe he's non-speaking, but also that upends Bitsy's feeling of being special and unique because she's a flyer, because now she's not the only flyer in class. And is there a story that we can do around flying? So that's where that started. And to be completely honest, the second book, I've heard this for a lot of people, the second book in a series is the most difficult. And this was not an exception. We went through a lot of different story ideas. My editor, Catherine Ledone, is amazing, and she's patient, but she's very direct as well. So we had a lot of dialogue about making this book just as good, least as good, if not better than the first book. That was really important for us. So we both worked our butts off on making sure that the second book was really a great story in its own right, and it was also a standalone. So it went through probably 75 different drafts and versions and so much editing. Like, I was definitely late on the whole thing. They had to give me extra time as we were sorting through this, but I'm glad that we gave it that extra time and that extra love and that extra effort. I think where we got to was right where it needed to be. I don't think it feels overworked as you're reading it. Yeah, we got to the story that we needed to get to, and yeah. So that's how it happened. And then, the art was still work, but it was a little easier since I had already drawn all the characters and I knew what the world looked like. I didn't have to invent that from scratch. But yeah, the back matter was a whole nother thing, because we wanted to add to that glossary and more about autism, and definitely make sure that we're giving you different material than we did in the first one, but not leaving you hanging. So you make sure that you have enough information to understand what we're talking about in the second book too. So that was also a lot of work, but good work. Work I'm glad to do. Work I'm glad is done.
Right. That's fair.
Yeah.
So in the second book, Bitsy learns about teamwork. How does this theme connect to the neurodivergent experience?
Well, for me, friendships have always been a challenge. So you'll kind of see that theme in a lot of my books. Worm and Caterpillar Are Friends is it's probably the other book that I'm most well known for. But it's Bitsy seeing her friendships go through a change is really what was at the heart of why I wanted to tell this story, and also have it be a tribute to those resilient friendships that's taken me a whole lifetime to be able to see. So I really wanted to talk about that. And also being an Army brat, I think, comes into that, because I moved around a lot. And I think Army brats are a lot more accepting of differences, just because we were, move so much, and you have to accept new students and new faces and people from different parts of the world pretty much immediately. And when my parents divorced and we moved to Utah, I was being integrated with students that had known each other since the beginning, since kindergarten. And I was coming in as a third grader, and there was this very immediate othering that happened to me on so many levels. So I think that's really stuck with me, when you do have a new student come in and how it does shift the dynamics of those friendship groups. But as far as teamwork, I think the other book that really inspired me when I was little was The Little Red Hen. And I relate very much to the little red hen and doing things alone, and I don't need any help. And I think the neurodivergent part of that is it's really hard for me to ask for and accept help because I feel like there's an obligation in that. And I don't always know if I'm going to be well enough to reciprocate. So if I do everything by myself and if I never owe anybody anything, then I won't be on the hook for something like that. So, that piece about working as a team and asking for help when you need it and working together, and also realizing that it's not a competition. We can all work together to achieve something together. And that's really what a book is too. It's not just the name. It is absolutely just not the name on the cover that makes a book happen. It's so many people that, my editors and my art directors and the line editors and, the people that correct the color and the people that, there's a whole team of people making a book work. So teamwork being important. And also as we're coming into the world we're at now, we really do have to rely on each other as communities. We really do have to work as a team. I love that part where they're saving Mo and how they use all their special abilities and that's really the teamwork part of it, not even the race part. That's where the teamwork comes in.
Yeah, I love that. When I reread it to my kids today, one of them pointed out about the math. There's a little math symbol.
The leverage one? Yeah.
Yeah, and she was like, that was in the earlier one. That's what they won. And I was like,
Yeah.
Hey, you made that connection. Nice.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad they noticed. Those are good eyeballs. Very
Honestly,
good.
I didn't notice it until they mentioned it, and I've read this book 17 times already.
That's funny. You mentioned math too, because I have dyscalculia, and so that was one thing during the art. We were almost to the finish line on it, and I get this emergency email from my editor, and she says the math isn't mathing. It's supposed to be tied, and one of the teams was 2 points ahead, and I'm like, how did I do that? Well, I know how I did that, but I went back and I'm like, okay, if we do this and we move this and we change these 2 pages and this person wins and that, and then I sent it back to them, and she's like, now it's flopped the other way. It's one short of being tied. So I spent another several days trying to figure out, okay, how do I correct that? And I finally got what I thought was dead on. I thought that I got the tie right. And we sent it to the art director, and the art director emails back and he says, we're off by 2. And it just turned out that he hadn't added one of the pages of artwork, and I thought I was losing my mind. I was like, but imagine if it had gone to press, because the kids are smart. The kids will absolutely do the math and be like, you said it's a tie and this is not a tie. So again, teamwork, you need a lot of people to keep an eyeball on these things, and because the kids will notice. They will know.
They will know. Yes, especially I read the first one, and I just skipped over a word, and they were like, you skipped a word. I was like,
yeah, they let you know.
I did. Thank you.
Yeah. They catch it.
Oh, very much so. Do you have any advice for young neurodivergent artists or writers who want to pursue storytelling? I don't know why I put young, any neurodivergent artist.
Anyone. This might be more of an ADHD thing, but finishing has always been that's what held me back. I bloomed a lot later than a lot of author illustrators do, just because I would have a lot of projects, but I wouldn't have much that was finished. And you really do need to have finished things in order to be able to get published. I don't know why they expect that of you. I have a book recommendation. It's called Refuse to Choose by Barbara Scher, and she's since passed away, but that was one of those books I was getting in my 30s and I really didn't have anything to show for all this work I'd done. I was drawing, I was writing stories. I was not getting any interest from any sort of publishing thing, and I'm like, if I could get organized, if I could get my shit together, then maybe I can do this. So I went to the Barnes & Noble to look for a book on organizing, and I swear to you, this book fell off the shelf. Refuse to Choose. As I started to read it, I now know that she talks about scanners, and these are people that have interests that, they're always looking for the next new cool thing that's out on the horizon. She describes different types of scanners. It's all about ADHD, but she's so complimentary about like how you have this brilliant brain that wants to discover so many things, and aren't you special? Like, she really does pat you on your back about it, but then she gives you tools so you can actually finish things. So that I use the techniques from that book all the time, just to like work backwards from what I need to have in order to have a package that I can actually send to a publisher. And then I just back it up. What do I need before I have the package? Well, I'm going to need a completed PDF of the dummy book. And what do I need before the completed, I just back it up to today. And then I take one step on that path towards it, and then it's like a clear path towards it, towards that goal. So I highly recommend that book if you struggle at all with like getting something done. She also helps you identify which things you don't have to finish, which things you should finish, and also the fact that you can enjoy all of those things. So I'm not going to show you the other side of my office, but I have all sorts of crafts and ideas and piles of books and all sorts of things that I'm fully interested in, but now I also know how to get things done. So I hope that helps someone, a young creative. And I would also highly recommend not using AI. That will hurt your creative ability. I think back to those times that I was really struggling with, well, I still struggle with everything, but like struggling with writing or illustrating. And if I had had a button that I could smash that would do it for me, I would have happily smashed that button. And I'm so glad I didn't have that button, because all that struggle has made me really good at figuring out ideas, and also that pattern recognition of, learning what's working, what's not working, and how to tie things together. Like, that's a muscle. Creativity is a muscle. And if you take away that weightlifting, that struggle that you need in order to grow that muscle that's creativity, you will never be able to get to the point that you can actually do it, and do it confidently and do it well. You won't even be able to see what you're missing. So I just really, please resist the urge to use, the generative AI or ChatGPT or any of that, especially like people are like, I just use it to give me ideas. And I'm like, that's the most fun and easiest part of all of that. Why would you take the pleasure of idea generation away from yourself? And also, AI can only create stuff that's built on other people's stuff. So it's never going to create a new idea. It's never going to come up with a new idea. You are naturally creative, and you have everything it takes to come up with great ideas. And the struggle is actually good. The struggle is what makes it good. All right, I went off a little.
I love it, though. I love it. Okay, so these are questions from my littles.
Yay!
So my class is made up of 3 and 4-year-olds.
I love them. That's great.
I believe more 3-year-olds. But so the first one, which this is, I just wrote what they said. Do you write first or draw first?
That is a very good question. So I usually draw first. Ideas come to me in my sketchbook, and it's usually a character that shows up, like, drawing that little bat. And then I just start to ask those characters questions like, who are you? And what do you want to tell me? Do you have a story to tell me? And so as I'm drawing, I'm thinking about the words that might go with them, but it's always drawings first. But that's a really good question. And then as I'm going through the process of writing, illustrating, it's give and take. Sometimes I'll be doing the drawing, sometimes I'll be doing the writing. When I think the drawing's all done and the words come in, sometimes things have to get moved around. But that's the nice thing about being a author and illustrator, is I can be moving those things really right up until the end, because I'm can the picture tell the story better than the words? Can the words tell the better story better than the picture? And then I just take one of them out so it's not duplicating itself so much. But that's an excellent question.
Another question, why did you decide to write the words and draw the pictures?
Well, there are a lot of stories that are just words, right? For the older books, you won't see very many. It's kind of sad. You won't see many pictures in there, right? But there are picture books that don't have any words. They're wordless books. So that's a totally fine way to tell a story. For me, I like that words can do things that pictures can't. So I won't say everything in a picture that the words are telling you, but you'll be able to follow the whole story because I'm using both words and illustrations to tell a story. And that's one thing I love about picture books is it's a marriage, it's a collaboration, it's teamwork between words and pictures, and they're both doing different things. And I'm going to use every tool I can to best tell the story that I can tell. But that's a great observation. And also, before you can even write words, you can tell stories with pictures. That's what I was doing. That's how I started being a storyteller, is to draw pictures that didn't have words yet.
I love that. And have you written a book without doing the illustration?
I have. This book right here is called When You Love a Book, and it is illustrated by my friend Heather Brockman Lee. And I wrote the story and she drew the pictures, which was really fun for me. And as I was writing this story, I was thinking about my friend Heather, and I knew that she would be the perfect person to illustrate it. I knew that this was a sweeter book, and Heather is a sweeter person. So I asked her when I was done writing it if she would consider illustrating it for me. And when she read the book, she cried and she said, of course, of course. And this says, "A book is a friend that you meet when you're new, a strong, sturdy friend who won't mind if you chew." Yeah.
Cute.
So it's a tribute to books. A book is a friend found in all shapes and sizes, a buddy who's bound to be full of surprises. So this is our book, and this came out last year. And it has book riddles in it, so you can guess classic children's books. And it was really fun to be able to do book events with my very good friend. And we're doing World Read Aloud Day on Wednesday, and we get to read this book together. But it was really fun to see the kind of pictures she came up, because I'm always thinking about what the pictures might look like while I'm writing something, since I'm an illustrator. So she surprised me. She did things that I would never have thought of, and it's so fun to see that. But yes, I have written a book that somebody else illustrated.
We're going to have to add that to our class list.
Yeah, I think you'll like it. And you should be able to find it at the library too.
Perfection. This is a very interesting one, especially today because I had my communication looks differently for everyone, and it had an AAC tablet on it, so that they loved the connection. But they asked, what does Enzo's talking tablet, or does Enzo's talking tablet have a sound?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it says the words, and I describe that by using speech bubbles. I'm also a graphic novelist, a comic artist, so using speech bubbles is something I like to do. So I was able to do that with Enzo's speech tablet. But yeah, that's a really great question. I wonder what voice he has on his tablet and how it says words, and if it has other sounds that go with things. That is a great question. Now I want to know that too, but in my mind, yes, it does have sound. What a good question.
There was I don't remember which one, but it's when he asks if they're friends and there's like a little heart, and one of my kids was like, so if you push that, does it just sound like love? And I was like, what does love sound like? And he goes, I'll think about it.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh, cute.
Yeah. Yeah, in my mind, I thought it meant like the word love or heart. Yeah, love. But yeah, what does love sound? Oh, now that's a book idea. What does love sound like? Oh my gosh. I'll give you some royalty, okay?
Perfect.
Wow. Okay.
And one of the questions, so with some of my kids, I've been open about me being autistic. Some of them don't understand it. Sure. So the kids that I talk to, I disclose that I was also autistic. And so they asked, why does Enzo and Bitsy wear headphones and some autistic people don't?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, we all have different sensory sensitivities and needs, and also ups and downs on when we could use some quieter environments. I don't always wear mine. You know, it seems like if I have a lot of like stressors or I've had to do a lot of activities, then I'll be way more sensitive to sound. And those are times that I will definitely be using my headphones more often. You know, and some people are less, some people like a lot of sound. You know, some autistic people want constant sound. For me, like even now, I can hear the electricity in the walls, and sometimes it drives me up the wall. So I will want extra, you know, using headphones. But, you know, it's just one of the tools. So I have those loops as well that I'll wear like in the grocery store, and I have a hat that has like a thicker, it's supposed to be for warming, but I'm like, oh wow, this muffles things really nicely. So it's just an extra layer of protection. But I don't always have to wear my headphones, but it sure is nice to be able to wear them and not feel weird about it, which is another reason why I'm glad these books are out there, because it normalizes those differences. I'm not listening to music or anything. I'm just trying to get a little quiet.
Yeah, I've had for the last 2 years, my classroom, I don't use fluorescent lights. I have string lights. I have non-flicker bulbs. And so when he asked that question, I was like, yeah, I was like, I might need headphones if the lights were on and if this was a thing. And I was like, I've made the classroom suitable for me, which also in turns help you guys, but I've made it help me. And so I don't necessarily need all of the tools that I might need in a different like scenario. I was like, see me at the airport and you won't see me without headphones.
Everything for sure. Exactly. Well, and I get to work from home now. I mean, we think about these accommodations that make us have the ability, like I wouldn't be able to do school visits. I wouldn't be able to, you know, be as creative as I am if I was still working in an office or I was working in a stressful, loud, I would just come home and be face down. I wasn't working on anything else. But now that I am able to work from home and I'm able to kind of control my environment a lot of ways, it gives me a lot more energy to do the things that I really want to do. And it does mean that I have less meltdowns, a lot less meltdowns, and that I don't need those tools as much as I do. I definitely go through periods of sensitivity where everything's annoying me more. You know, just creating the environment that helps us to thrive is huge. And also allowing ourselves to have that was another thing about discovering I was autistic and processing things. I'm like, why do I keep on doing that when that really annoys me? Like, maybe I can find a different way of managing that.
Yeah, beautiful. And then the last question that they have is, do you write at home?
Mm-hmm. I mostly write at home. Like I always come up with, I could probably come up with 3 different book ideas a day, and I always try and jot them down. But I do most of my work from my home, and right here in my home office, I'm sitting on a green velvet couch that I like to sit on, and this is my laptop, and I put the laptop on my lap, and I'll just sit in here, and I'll write, and I'll draw. I actually draw on screen. So this is stylus, and I can draw right on the screen, and it will show up on my art. So I can do everything from my house. Sometimes if I get stuck on the writing, it does help me to go somewhere else. So I can go to like the library and sit around the books and get a little work done there. Last week I had to go to the Subaru dealership, and sitting in the lobby with the free coffee and the snacks, and definitely headphones on there. But I get so much work done because I can't go anywhere. Like I'm just waiting for my car. So that's a really great place to work. But yes, I think the answer is yes, I work from home.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I write from home.
And then I have 2 questions that I feel like I'm going to ask everyone. Okay. So the first one is, what do you do to recharge and care for yourself as a neurodivergent professional? That's a very, very good question. I definitely block out, and I had to work with my mental health coach and therapist on this too, just blocking out time. Like this week, I know that I have a really big event on. All day long, I'm doing World Read Aloud, and all day Friday, I'm doing school visits and also a conference. So I have X's on my calendar between those days, so I have full recovery days. Nothing happens on those days because I know I very well might be face down, like just not able to do anything else. So blocking out those
times has really helped me a lot, and just managing those obligations. But, and also just really noticing when I'm starting to get irritated, when I'm starting to kind of have that mounting pressure that means that I am heading towards a meltdown or burnout, which is the worst. And noticing what my tells are. So if I catch myself like cleaning crevices, like just getting hyper focused on crevices or scraping the carpet to get like hair out of the carpet or something, I'm like, oh, these are the things the soothing things I do when I'm feeling stressed and I'm starting to feel, that overwhelm. And I can notice them now. So I'm like, oh, I need to take tomorrow off. Like, I need to have a long bath. I need to have a walk. I need to have a day that I'm not working or I don't open my computer or something like that. So just catching that stuff is really how I help manage and care for myself. And also having a therapist. Game changer, life changer. Yeah.
And then the last one is, what's one piece of advice or mantra that you have found yourself repeating in your work or your life that always like resonates with you?
Well, I've had a affirmation that I've been saying for probably 30 years now. And I believe it now. I did not believe it when I first started saying it. And it's going to say corny. It's going to sound corny, excuse me. But it was used to be the only way I could get myself to sleep is to say this over and over again. And it's, Kaz, I'm lovable, capable, worthy, and complete just as I am. I am lovable, capable, worthy, and complete just as I am. And I did not believe that for a long time. It would make me cry. It felt like a gut punch, but I've said it so much now. Like, I absolutely own that. So, I definitely believe in affirmations, but as far as themes in my book, I mean, I think that shows up in my book because I really want everyone else to own that piece about you are lovable, capable, worthy, and complete just as you are. I did not make that connection until right this minute, but that is absolutely a theme in my books. Absolutely.
I love that. Thank you so much for talking with me.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been great.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Welcome to All Kinds of Minds, Neurodiversity in Our World. I had so much fun recording this episode with Kaz Windness, author and illustrator. It was very much a fangirl moment for me. I am a big fan of hers, have been for a very long time. So I hope that you go check her out. Go check out her kids' books. Today, when this episode is coming out, Bitsy Bat Team Star will be out for sale. There will be a link tree in the description, so make sure you go check that out. Not only to get the books, but to get lesson plans, coloring sheets, and all that great stuff that she has on her blog. Make sure you go check out and follow Welcome Neurodiversity on our socials. They will also be linked below. And make sure you subscribe so you do not miss any of our future episodes. Thank you guys and have a fantastic day.